Hey guys, it's Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am coming to you with the first of kind of my year-end, year-beginning videos, and I thought what better way to kick off wrapping up the year of 2020 and looking forward to 2021 than by discussing whether or not I reached my 2020 goals. And on the whole, I'm pretty pleased with what I did regarding my goals because I pretty much always give myself permission not to complete my goals. My goals are more guidelines than actually anything I feel married to. I don't really get disappointed in myself if I don't complete them in a normal year. This year I was very, very forgiving with myself, as you might can imagine, because I think, like a lot of people, my reading kind of shifted in the spring and I went towards more comfort reading, and I read quite a bit of fantasy. So I know the months of the year that I typically feel the most kind of passion and the real drive to go on and get those goals done. I really feel that drive right there in the first 6 months of the year. I know I kind of lost that this year. And so right here towards the end of the year, I started wondering, should I be feeling like I need to start kind of crunching things in? But no, I definitely have not done that. When I'm filming this, there's still another week left in the year, but I don't feel as though I'm going to accomplish any more goals in that amount of time. So let's just get right into it. So my main goal this year that I had a video around was my Classics Community Challenge for the year. So really my main goal was to read 6 of the largest books on my TBR. And those are not necessarily classics. I intended all around to just read large books on my TBR that I've been putting off because of their size. I personally feel pretty good about that. I definitely feel like I read a lot of long books. But my classics list was around 8, I believe. Actually, it was 9. Oh dear. So on my classics list was Les Mis by Victor Hugo, which I intended to read a chapter a day of because Les Miserables actually has 365 chapters. It's actually a perfect book to read, 1 chapter a day for a year to get through it. And I fell off the rails with that in January, and once again, I did not stress about that because January was a very hectic month for me personally. So I'm not going to sweat that, but I'm also not going to roll it over into next year. I don't know when I will get to Les Mis in the future. I do feel as though I would really enjoy it, but I have to say I wasn't all that enthused by the translation that I got. I got a big, huge copy from a library book sale for literally 50 cents, and there were no notes in it. It was apparently a much older translation, so I think maybe I will hunt for a better translation, or maybe I will get it on audiobook, but I'm not rolling Les Mis over into the new year. In fact, I'm not going to roll over any of the books that were on this list into the new year because I do have other bookish goals that I'm going to focus on. And I will have a video coming that is dedicated all to the books that I plan to read in 2021 and the theme for the year, which is really interesting. But sadly, none of the ones that I didn't get to on this list fit into that theme, which I'm kind of happy about. I'm tired of stressing about big books. I'm not putting the pressure on myself to read massive books in 2021. But Les Mis is definitely not one that I'm putting on the list. You never know. I may at some point in the year feel like reading it, and maybe I will. And if I do, I will definitely let you know. But it is definitely a beast of a book, and it was definitely the longest on this list here. The next on my big classics list was Emma by Jane Austen, and I read this. Another goal of mine that was more of a soft goal was to go on and finish out Jane Austen this year, and I'm pleased to say that I did that. Emma is right now my favorite Jane Austen. It's one of the few Jane Austens that I think I actually like. I've come to the conclusion this year, this is something that I've had to have a long discussion with myself about this year, especially since I read 3 of her books. It's just that I don't think Jane Austen is an author for me. I think Emma stands out, and Emma stands out primarily because of who Emma is as a character. And I think the other characters in the novel really work well for me, but I know that what made me like this is that I watched the 2020 adaptation first, and I absolutely adore that film. And I think the film expanded on things that Jane Austen leaves to the imagination, and that's ultimately my problem with her work, is she doesn't give me enough. I don't think she gives me enough to work with. And I mean that in terms of dialogue, in terms of description, genuinely in terms of almost anything. I've just come to the conclusion this year that maybe Jane Austen is not the classic writer for me, and that's fine, but Emma is a 5-star read. And I think of the ones, of these big ones that I've read this year, it is my favorite because sadly enough, the majority of the big books on this TBR didn't really hit it for me. So this was my big success of the long classics list. Next on my list was Anna Karenina. I'm very pleased to say that I finished Anna Karenina. I, for some odd reason, cannot find my copy of it, but I also had an older translation of Anna Karenina, and I often read it alongside listening to the audiobook that was read by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and I thoroughly enjoyed that experience. I really enjoyed that audiobook. On the whole though, Anna Karenina has not stuck with me at all. And I honestly expected it to. It was a 4-star read. I really enjoyed it. It's definitely not a book that I'm gonna try to critique for you because I know Anna Karenina is a lot of people's favorite book of all time. A lot of people rate it very highly in terms of the kind of Western canon, and I see why it has its place there. I just expected this book to blow me away based on what everybody else has said. I expected to walk away from it at the end feeling like a changed person, feeling like I'd read a new favorite book, and I just hadn't. Anna Karenina was not my favorite book of the year. It was not bad. It was actually a very good book. It was a very great classic. It's one I will recommend to people. I actually don't think it's as hard to read as many people think that it is. And I definitely think an audiobook can help with that. It is a very long book. And I will say you start to feel that length towards the middle because you start to spend time with characters that maybe you don't care about as much, or characters you really liked at the beginning. Storylines start to drag there in the middle, and you're kind of wondering when the action will pick up again. So that's just something I would say keep in mind. I enjoyed Anna Karenina. I don't want to sound like I didn't like it. I just expected to walk away from Anna Karenina maybe with, you know, a whole new expectation of reading, but certainly I expected to walk away having read a new favorite book. And it just wasn't that. I've actually found that in the month since I finished it, Anna Karenina has fallen off for me. I don't remember as much about it as I would like to. I'm not sure if that's because I read it across multiple months and I read it using the audiobook for the most part, but that was my experience with Anna Karenina. Ultimately, my goal for the year with this long classics list was that I really wanted to make Anna Karenina a priority. If I didn't get to anything else on the list, if I got to Anna K, I was gonna feel very accomplished. And so I do feel very good about reading Anna Karenina and kind of crossing her off my bucket list. But I do feel like maybe I missed what everybody was so enchanted by, and I wonder why that is. I don't know if it was because I was reading the Constance Garnett translation. I don't know if it was because, you know, I read it across multiple months and I should have sat down and read it in one go. But it was a very good book. It's just not a new favorite. Next on my list is the Brothers Karamazov, and I'm pleased to tell you that I've actually started this recently, so I'm going to kind of count it. This will definitely swing over into 2021, but I'm not going to put it on a goals list. I don't want to pressure myself with it, and I actually find that I do so much better with books if I don't put them on a goals list. But am I going to stop creating bookish goals? No. So I am not going to put this on any kind of bookish goals list for the new year, but I do think I will read it and really enjoy it. I'm so far only maybe 80 pages in, and I'm really genuinely fascinated by this. And I will say I'm far more into it at this point than I was with Anna Karenina around the same page mark. So I am maybe hopeful that Dostoyevsky will work for me in a way that Tolstoy does not, which I think might be an unpopular opinion, but I also know that Dostoyevsky enjoys his philosophy. I do not. So that's going to be a very difficult thing for me. I've been warned by multiple people that there's going to be aspects of this, and Crime and Punishment in particular, that I'm probably going to struggle with because I just don't get on with philosophy. So I'm looking forward to this. It's just a huge book, and I do think I will eventually have to get the ebook version of it, because the reason why I have not yet reached 100 pages and that I haven't carried on with it so much is because every time I think about picking it up, I know I have to pick up this brick. And this is not one of my favorite Penguin classics. You all know how I get about paper quality, but look at this. I mean, it's a difficult book to read. I wish it was one of those big floppy ones. But one thing I have been doing with this that I think has made this a very successful reading experience and will help me, because I definitely am not going to finish this year or in maybe the next month, but I've gone through, and every chapter I finish, I come back and I write a little sentence at the top of the chapter and I say what the chapter was about. So if I do get lost and I do feel like I don't remember what happened before, I can always go back and read my little chapter summaries. But I will say, I think the language in this is utterly beautiful. So I am hopeful about Dostoyevsky. Unfortunately, I also had Crime and Punishment on my list this year. I didn't get to that. I also had Dr. Zhivago on my list, which I also didn't get to. And the other that I did not get to was Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. And that is a running joke at this point on my channel. I have had Wives and Daughters on my yearly TBR for 3 years straight. And I am not going to put it on my yearly TBR for 2021 in the hopes that that will actually make me pick it up. I do feel like now where I'm at with Elizabeth Gaskell that I kind of intentionally did not get to it this year, because I started reading her first published works, and I've decided that since Wives and Daughters was her last, that I should probably save it for last, because it is so many people's favorite of hers, and I don't hear much said about some of her other works like Sylvia's Lovers, which I think I'll probably really get on with, but I don't want to read what might be some of the best she has to offer and then leave things that are middling to the last with her, because I really enjoy Elizabeth Gaskell's writing, and I know that Wives and Daughters is going to be a treat. It's also just so very long, and I know a lot of people really feel fondly about Wives and Daughters, so I do feel like I'm saving it for a bit of a treat. Maybe for Victober 2021 I will feel comfortable tackling it. So next on my list of big classics was Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray, and I did not have the best experience with this. I ultimately DNF'd this halfway through, and I feel incredibly bad about that, because I just feel as though Vanity Fair should have been a classic for me. I feel like Becky Sharp alone as a character really should have clicked with me, and yet I felt like everything about Vanity Fair was lackluster, except for his writing. I did find his writing to be very cheeky and very funny, but I found the characters to be a little bit lackluster, and Kate Howe said last year when she read this that Gone with the Wind is a retelling of Vanity Fair. And once you know that, it is so very hard to divorce the characters in Vanity Fair from their Gone with the Wind counterparts, who are 10 times richer than anybody in Vanity Fair. Thinking specifically in terms of the love interest here, I don't even remember his name, whereas I would say Rhett Butler is probably one of the most memorable characters of the last century, in my opinion. And so there is just so much about this that falls flat, I think, because I know that Gone with the Wind came and did it better. I do want to come back to this. I do intend to eventually finish it, and hopefully I will come back and start it from the beginning and have a really wonderful experience with it, because I do know this takes place during the Napoleonic Wars, and I'm very interested in that right now. I'm reading a biography of Napoleon, and so I'm interested to see it from somebody else's perspective rather than his, because I have to tell you, I somewhat am rooting for Napoleon in his own biography, of course. So I think I would enjoy this more now because I know a little bit more about the time period in which it is set. Multiple people told me when I said I DNF this that I should come back to it and that I should give it another chance. So I do plan on doing that, and hopefully when I come back around to it, I enjoy it a whole lot more than I did the first time through. Last but not least on my long classics book list was Bleak House by Charles Dickens. And I am going to count this because I am technically currently reading it. Me and a co-worker, we have decided to read this in serialization format. So we're reading the chapters that came out month by month on a month by month schedule. So we probably won't even finish this in 2021. We're trying to see whether or not we really click with the story in this way, or if maybe when we come to the end of it, will we feel as though we really know these characters, as though the book is one of our favorites because we've spent so much time with it. And it's very helpful to me to have somebody else holding me accountable to reading it. So Dickens is not his favorite author, but I really, really enjoy Dickens. And the sad thing I have to say so far for me, I'm 150 pages in, is not doing much for me at all. So I'm hopeful that that changes as things progress. But right now, 150 pages in, I have to tell you, nothing has happened. Nothing has happened. I don't feel as though any of the characters are memorable. In fact, the main character kind of irritates me. I'm far more interested in one of the side characters than I am in anyone else. And I have the sense that he's going to be the character that Dickens, you know, hooks into my heart, and then he'll probably kill him at the end, because that's my luck with Dickens, is that I always like somebody that he then decides is kind of the moral heart of the story unintentionally. So I am dreading that, but luckily I probably have over a year before I finish this. So there's a lot more to look forward to with Bleak House. I'm hopeful about it, but I will say that right now I found it fairly lackluster, and so has he, my co-worker. We have had a lot of interesting discussions about Bleak House, but we always say when we sit down for a meeting, what even happened in this chapter? So I'm hopeful that that changes as we get further along. So that was one of my big goals of the year. Another of my big goals of 2020 was to binge the Brontes, and that legitimately did not happen. I did not finish a single Bronte book this year. I DNF'd both Villette and Shirley. Villette, I feel honestly pretty bad about, because I honestly don't think I want to return to it. And I didn't think that at the time when I DNF'd it. I just thought maybe I wasn't in the mood for it. But upon reflection, I don't know that I'm going to enjoy Villette. Shirley, I was really enjoying. Shirley was the Victober read-along this year, and I was really, really enjoying it. I just have difficulty reading a chapter of a book a day. I think that's something that really doesn't work for me, and so what I should have done was sit and read it straight through. But just as soon as I would get into it, I'd say, oh, well, I'm stopping for the day because I'm caught up. And so I got to maybe 150 pages, and I never finished it. So that was an unintentional DNF. I feel sure I'm going to love Shirley, and I would like to keep the Bronte binge in mind. I would love to really finish them out in 2021. I don't feel like it's going to happen, partially because I don't want to finish the Brontes. I really genuinely don't want to reach a point where I've read everything they wrote. So I think that held me back this year, but they also have a tone that definitely did not vibe with me in 2020. And so it was hard for me to say that I actively wanted to pick up a Bronte book, because I knew it was going to deal with some heavy stuff, and I just was not really in the mood to deal with anything heavy. So sadly, reading all of the Brontes' works was an actual failure for me in 2020. I did not achieve that at all. I also had a list of historical fiction books that I planned to get to in 2020. And I don't know that I read but maybe 3 of them, and that's fine. Some years are stronger on historical fiction for me, some years are not. This year was just not a historical fiction year. And the sad thing is, I put a lot of books on that list that I've decided I genuinely am not all that interested in anymore. And so sadly, many of them have already walked on to the used bookstore, or they will be doing that shortly. That's part of my 2021 goals. So just wait for that here in a few minutes. But I don't know. I'm definitely not going to set myself a historical fiction reading list in 2021, sadly enough. I know those are very popular videos for whatever reason. I'm always shocked by the reception those videos get, the historical fiction that I want to read in the new year. But I think it's best that I don't place any kind of restrictions on myself in that regard. I think I'm far more likely to pick up a book if it's not on a list of things that I feel like I need to read. So I'm going to give myself a break with historical fiction this year, because this was also an utter failure in my opinion. Another goal I had that was more of a personal goal was to finish a first draft of any project that I've been working on, but mainly of my Renaissance historical fantasy, which I have talked about before on my channel. And I also met that goal right here at the very end of the year. I met that goal. So I am feeling over the moon about that. That's a genuinely wonderful achievement for me to actually finish something. So I feel great about that. So I think in terms of writing goals for the new year, editing and a second draft are going to be my big goals for 2021, and to potentially write a first draft of another project just to keep myself in the habit of writing. I also had a more personal goal of reading more nonfiction. I don't necessarily feel as though I did this. I did read a lot of nonfiction, but I don't think it was any more than I typically read. I just think I had some really heavy hitters this year. I really enjoyed the nonfiction that I read this year, whereas last year, perhaps I read some more nonfiction, if I'm thinking correctly, but I don't think it was as memorable. So I'm really pleased with this, even if I didn't technically read more nonfiction. I read nonfiction that I really thoroughly enjoyed. So let's talk about some general 2021 goals. So in terms of writing, I've got to do a second draft. I've got to edit and do a second draft, and I really want beta readers to see it within the first 6 months of the year. I don't know if that's doable. I really do not know if that's doable, but that's my ultimate dream in terms of that. I will have a video coming that's all about kind of the theme of the year in terms of my bookish goals. So I have a theme for this year that is actually going to encompass all of the genres that I want to read more of. So classics, historical fiction, as a matter of fact, and nonfiction. I have a theme that's going to encompass that, and so that video will be coming probably in a few days, I hope. But in terms of other bookish goals that are not my kind of yearly TBR goals, I am going to be unhauling viciously. I absolutely am. I've already unhauled once this month, and I'm going to probably unhaul again. The reasoning for this is I am absolutely running out of space. I still live at home, and one day I am going to get a place of my own, wherever that may be, and I'm gonna have to lug these books with me. And so I am already trying to think in terms of that, like if I were to move, what would I want to take with me? And so what would I not? So I'm planning to just really look over everything, and I do this pretty frequently. Sadly, in 2020, that did not happen nearly as often as it does for me in previous years, because my used bookstore was not open for a large majority of the year. And so typically I would say seasonally, I go through and unhaul things. And maybe in 2020, I unhauled twice. And it probably was not nearly as much as I normally unhaul, and I certainly had far more books coming in. So this was a year where far more came in than went out, which is unusual for me. I typically am somebody who unhauls quite a bit. Books have a high turnover rate in my house, except for in a few cases. And so that's something that I've discovered about myself this year, is that I'm very interested in adding to my collections. My Penguin Black Spines are the main one. I also have my Penguin English Library. I have the newer Oxford World Classics that I've fallen in love with this year. And so I think even when I read a classic that I don't like, if it is in that collection, I intend to keep it. So that does complicate things in terms of space. So I'm going to be really thinking about that this year. And so of course, going hand in hand with unhauling, I am going to not be hauling nearly as much. 2020 was a very special year. as I'm sure we all know, and I really wanted to support authors. I wanted to support bookstores. I wanted to support websites. I wanted to do what I could while I could to help the publishing industry and to help bookshops. And so I definitely feel as though I did that, but now I have way more books that I haven't read than books that I have read, which is not unusual. Like I said, there's a high turnover rate of books in my house. I'm typically always thinking about getting rid of things because as I have become less and less of a rereader, some books I don't keep around. So I'm thinking, you know, when I was younger, I certainly had favorite series that I probably intended to one day reread, but have not stuck with me. So why should I keep them? That's the kind of tough conversation that I'm about to have with myself. But I'm not getting rid of anything that's a favorite series. I would never get rid of The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. Never, sorry, never in a million years. There are plenty of series that I will never get rid of, but things that were kind of middling, books that were maybe a 3-star read, do I really intend to come back to those? That's kind of the question that I intend to ask myself. And if it is a book that I haven't read, but I've had it on my shelf for years and I've yet to pick it up, do I intend to read it? Truly, do I intend to read it? Because I have changed so much as a reader since coming on to BookTube. I fully understand that there are probably books on my shelf that I bought years ago, really excited about, but that now I've changed so much as a reader, I don't think I would enjoy. And so those books should absolutely go find a new home. They should absolutely go to my used bookstore. So I do have a haul coming probably this week because I got a few things for Christmas, and also because I did go to the used bookstore when I unhauled a few days ago, and they had some things actually. I thought I was going at a pretty good time where things would be sparse, but they actually had a few things that I really, really wanted. So I will have that haul this week, but I am hoping that it is the only haul you will see from me for the first 6 months of the year. And this excludes pre-orders. I do have a few things pre-ordered, not a lot, but I am going to, of course, get in things and series that I'm really excited about. I have a lot of series finishers coming out in 2021, as a matter of fact. So I am really excited about new releases and newer titles, but what I need to stop myself from doing is the used books. I need to stop getting on thrift books. That is the #1 thing I need to do. I need to not get on thrift books ever again. Books, none of it. I just can't look at it or go to my used bookstore, because I love used books because you can get so many of them for the price of a new book. And that's a dangerous thing, especially when I'm thinking about space. So I am just trying to think in terms of the future here, the eventual future that maybe won't happen in 2021, but maybe in 2022, 2023, I have to think about moving into maybe, let's say an apartment, and it would be, let's say, a small apartment. I definitely cannot take every book with me, and I don't think that all of these books should remain at home. If I am never going to really see them or read them, why do they need to be here? Why do I need to keep them? So those are the kind of hard conversations that I'm getting ready to have with myself. But I did mention rereading, and rereading is going to be one of my goals for the new year. I used to reread quite a bit, and I always enjoyed it. I just absolutely loved the experience of rereading prior to BookTube, and there are books I have reread loads and loads of times that I have yet to return to, that I haven't returned to since being on BookTube, because I think when you're thinking in terms of doing a monthly wrap-up or even a yearly wrap-up, you don't want to talk about a book that you've already talked about, if that makes sense. But I used to really enjoy it, and I used to get a lot out of rereading. So I would love to reread some of my favorites this year. The #1 one is going to be Dante. I want to reread the Divine Comedy. I really, really do. I think it's time, and I've said it for years that I was going to sit down and reread it, and I haven't done that yet. So I am definitely going to reread Dante this year. I would also like to reread a book that I did not like at all, but that I feel like I should like, and that's The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I know. I know. This is one of the few books in my life that I can truly tell you I hated. And I never ever want to talk about it because A Secret History is so many people's favorite book of all time. And it apparently speaks to so many people on a deep level. And I think people believe that it should work for me. And I believe that too. I don't see why The Secret History does not work for me because it is my brand of pretentious. But I genuinely hated it the first time I read it. So I would like to see whether or not that holds true in a reread, or if I have changed enough as a reader that this is a book that now I really, really enjoy. So I definitely wanted to reread a favorite and a least favorite and see, does my opinion change on them? I really hope it does not change on Dante, and I don't think it will. But I definitely want to reread Dante and The Secret History this year. I would also like to reread, you know, tons of classics that I studied in school that I have never returned to since. I would love to reread Paradise Lost. You do not know how much I want to reread Paradise Lost or The Fairy Queen. And The Fairy Queen would take me all year to read, but I would adore rereading The Fairy Queen or the Aeneid. The Aeneid, I do think I probably will reread this year. So I am looking forward to fulfilling that goal. I think that's a goal that will be fairly easily achievable. I'm hoping so anyway, because I think that will be a really fun and interesting goal. Something I also really want to do this year is something I started doing in 2020, fairly late in the game, and that's keeping a quote journal. I saw Kate Howe was doing this during Victober this year and was writing a quote in a journal every day from the book that she was currently reading for Victober. And I said, you know what? I just think I should do that in general. I think I would really get a lot out of that. And then if I ever did unhaul a book, I would still have my favorite quotes from it in a particular place because I used to be fairly good about updating quotes on Goodreads. And now I rarely get on Goodreads. I feel like my Goodreads is so far behind what I'm currently doing, what I'm currently reading. I feel like keeping a quote journal would be a really enjoyable and fun thing to do, and it would be something really great to look back on at the end of the year and say, look at all the books that I read and the quotes that maybe I have forgotten about but that struck me as particularly beautiful or insightful earlier in the year. I, of course, also want to carry on with Mary Shelley. My goal with Mary Shelley and the Romantics this year is to really focus on Mary Shelley's short stories. I think unless I make that a goal, I probably won't do it. So I'm going to make it a goal to read some of Mary Shelley's short stories because I did read 3 of her novels this year and I absolutely loved that experience. I adore her. Mary Shelley is maybe she has surpassed Dante. Maybe she is my favorite writer of all time. High praise. But I really adore Mary Shelley and I would love to carry on with her. And I saw, interestingly enough, on Twitter the other day, a list of her reading for 1820. And so I would like to kind of look up a list of books that she planned on reading in 1821 and see if there is any overlap and if I should read anything that was on her list in 2021. Last but not least, in terms of my bookish goals, is to read the New Testament in its entirety, which I have never done. And I am ashamed to say it. I have never done that. And I have attempted many times in the past to read the Bible in a year. And I always fall off about the 6-month mark. And so I think it's going to be easier for me if I try to attack one section of the Bible before I attack it all, because I always read, you know, the same thing over and then I stop right around the same part. So I am not doing that this year. I am going to challenge myself to read the New Testament in its entirety, and I think it will be a really wonderful and rewarding experience because there's much of the New Testament, of course, that I've read many times, but there are books and letters in the New Testament that I'm not sure I have ever read. And so I'm really excited to see what is new there. So that's how I did on my 2020 goals, and that's what I'm looking forward to doing in 2021. I would love to know down below what your goals are for the new year and whether or not you achieved your goals this year. And do not feel bad if you didn't. definitely don't. This was not the year to set really huge goals for yourself, and it's definitely not the year to feel bad about not achieving your goals. But that's going to be all from me today. I hope you're all having a great week. Happy reading. Goodbye.